Hello and welcome back to the Dropping in Surf Show. My name is Rob Case, and I am a paddling coach located in Northern California. In today's episode, we are sitting down with Dan Mori of Fulcrum Surf. He's out of Encinitas, California. He's been on the show before, had an amazing episode on magic surfboards. And I highly recommend that you go back and listen and watch that one on YouTube. It's been a while since we had Dan on the show. We've had him on a few times. We did the Surf Ranch one with him as well. And today we're going to talk about surf progression. How do surfers progress in surfing? Because it's been a hot topic we deal with all the time. What are the best methods to teach, to learn? What are kind of the common hangups? We're going to talk about all that. So super exciting. Hope you enjoy it. I feel like I was just there.
I know. It's the meeting spot.
It's a great meeting spot with the
Yeah.
bamboo. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
It's like,
So we want to talk about progression. I know you mentioned it when we were hanging out in at the clinic.
yeah.
And why don't I start out just by letting listeners know there's been a ton of research in motor learning and across a lot of different sports. And there was this guy, I don't know if you know about this guy named Edward Thorndike. I talk about him a lot in the blog, and I think I mentioned him on the podcast before. But this guy was like the godfather of motor learning, did a ton of studies. And he's the one that, you hear like perfect practice makes perfect. He's the one that basically studied that and concluded that, yeah, if you have quality repetition, you're going to learn something
Yeah.
quicker, and it's that simple. Now, I always tell people I have the easiest job in the world. I can stick someone in the pool, make them do 1,000 repetitions of their stroke.
Right.
But you, as a surf coach, you don't have that opportunity. Your job is so much harder to move someone along that quality repetition curve. So,
Yes.
what do you think has been kind of the best methods to learn or the best methods to teach that you think people could progress the fastest with, or I guess the highest quality?
Yeah. Well, you know, obviously surf coaching, having someone teach you from the beginning is a lot easier than, hey, I'm going to learn this myself and pick up all the bad habits and then coming to me and I have to fix it. And it's like, man, if we could have just started from the beginning, it's so easy. I lay the foundation. Now you're taking off
Yeah.
versus you built this 2-inch slab of concrete. I have to break it down for a 4-inch slab of concrete, fortify it, and then we take off and build that house, And so, um, and surfing is one of those things that you have uh, fear of the ocean and the water and the unknown, whether it's sea creatures or the water currents
Yeah.
and being comfortable with that. And then the second thing is the crowd. So you're kind of like, wow, these people are vibing me. Am I in the way? It's kind of how I feel with golf. If I go in the golf, I do not want to see anybody pulling up with their cart because I have the worst golf swing and I'm embarrassed and I don't want to like see them chuckling behind me going, look at his form. It's terrible.
We got to go golfing together because I'm the same way.
Okay. And then maybe, I'll have a couple beers and I'll be like, okay, I don't even care anymore,
Yeah.
but until you get to that point and, so if I took you out, then I'd be like, okay, you live in this area. This is where you should be surfing with other people that, aren't going to hassle you. And, and then riding the right board, when you first start out, you want to have the biggest board possible so that it's easier. It's like you're walking on a pier versus, people want to buy the shortest board quick. And if they stood up one time, they're like, I'm buying a hard board. And then all of a sudden their progression, now it's going to expose all your flaws right away instead of, doing it the right step, get the quality reps, like you said, the motor patterns, get it nailed before you're going down in size and things like that. And so, but on the other hand, some people stay there forever and they never move beyond that big board, that
I think
comfort.
that's like, so I was just thinking the dreaded plateau.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's kind of like when you feel like you've hit your threshold of progression. Because it's like there's one problem. A lot of people don't even know that they haven't continued to progress until they see it on video. I think video is the
Absolutely.
it just exposes everything, you know. So there's the recognition that you're not getting better, even though you might feel like you're getting better. But then there's that point at which if you are a good student and you've done the coaching and you've plateaued, do you think that's kind of a signal that says, hey, listen, it's time to reset. You got to go back a step maybe to then progress forward. Or how do you think about that dreaded plateau when you run into students?
Well, it it really depends on if you catch the wave by sheer effort or and it's really important that most people are it's just by sheer effort. They paddle hard, they catch the wave, they don't even know. It's just like paddle your heart out and hope it works. And so
Hope. Yeah.
yeah, that's where people start is because they're frustrated not catching waves, so they just do anything they can, and then they pearl on 30% or 50% of the time, which means the nose going underwater, and there comes the fear. And so what the coaching does is it shows you to look back at the wave so you can kind of see the wall of the face of the wave to see how steep it's ramping up. If
Yeah.
you can't see that, then you're just hoping, and then the wave jacks up, lifts the tail up, nose goes down, you're overreaching, you're going under, and that's how fear is imprinted in your mind at that point. And then you start getting scared, and that's why you want to ride it with a foam board too in the beginning to kind of solidify. And it's okay if it hits you in the head, or just one of those cheap foam boards, and kind of work those kinks out first.
Yeah, it's that learning curve because I've seen you ride a foam board and you rip the snot out of it. So it's not the board that makes the surfer, it's the surfer that makes the surfer,
Yeah.
essentially. So what are your thoughts on matching the board with the right location that you're surfing at too?
Yes. So I look at it as when you first start out, you have the big board, and that's because you have three things. You're not in surf shape yet. So you need that board to kind of help you a little bit. Otherwise, it's like a daunting task and you're just going to give up. And then the second thing is that you want to catch weaker waves with that board because you're not ready to kind of catch ramping waves. Sometimes you might accidentally catch ramping waves, which is more vertical. And you might get lucky here and there. And then the third thing is physicality. Are you fit? The older you start, you're not a whippersnapper just popping up, like a cat anymore. So you kind of have to have more technique, and therefore surf coaching comes in to kind of say, hey, this is where your hands go. So learn the right techniques from a coach, someone who knows what they're really doing, so that it can send you off in the right direction. And then that's all you need. If you're kind of a go-getter, just get one coaching to calibrate you on everything, and then go 6 weeks with just trial and error. And then you might reach a point where you're like, man, I'm in shape now. I can catch the right part of the wave. Then you start thinking about your surfing progression, because on those foam boards and all those big boards, it's too many leaders to be able to carve and turn. Yes, you can still carve and go slow and things like that, but if you're ADD like me and you want to go up and down and do floaters, and then you need to drop down and leaderage.
Yeah, and I gotta let the listeners know. Dan can rip the snot on a 9.6 and like a 5.6. Like it doesn't matter. Like, and it's all technique. So I think what you mean by that is if you want to turn faster, quicker,
Yeah,
more critical turns, it's not that you can't do it on those big boards, but there is a point that swing weight just becomes too much, and
absolutely.
everything needs to slow down, right? Um, so how do we know what that point is? And because where I surf my local, it's really steep. It's a shortboard wave. There's not usually longboards there. The curvature doesn't fit a longboard. But there's another break that's all longboards and you can't shortboard. So how do you like when you plateau? Let's say you're surfing, if I'm surfing my little longboard break, but I want to surf a shortboard, how do I know what are the telltale signs that says, hey, I actually have to move to a different surf break.
Mhm. So first sign of it is you're bored. You're kind of doing the same thing. You stand up, and some people are fine with that of just going straight for a long time, and some people aren't. So it's you kind of have to get to that point where you're like, isn't there something else, besides this? And what happens is people get complacent. They go surfing wherever everybody is. So now they're fighting a wave that um, where everybody is, and your wave count goes down. And
Yeah.
so there's sometimes a lot of peaks here and there that are a lot smaller but better shape, and you can get way more reps because if you only catch four waves, then you can't really. I mean, four waves is not much. I mean, versus 20 waves. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
So it's
And
I always think of it as whatever you're working on. Like if you're at that stage where you've passed the foam stage, you're starting to go down in size, but you're still dialing in the takeoff, right? It doesn't matter if the wave closes out as much because
yeah,
you can get the reps in closeout waves. But now let's progress to the next thing. Now we're doing bottom turns to top turns, right? Or we're bottom turns to something down the line, some at least two turns, right?
yeah,
Boom, boom. So now you need something that at least holds open for that time period,
yes,
right? And then as you keep progressing, the requirement you need the wave to be at changes. And so that's the way I think about it in terms of, okay, you need to find out what you're working on. Am I going two turns, bottom top? Then I'm looking for that kind of wave. And can get 20 reps over here with nobody on it, or I can get 4 reps over here with everybody on it. But
right,
that wave that everybody's on it, I can get more than two waves
right,
or two turns on. Right. So it's like, again, if you're thinking about progression, I'm always hounding people. I'm like, guys, like, let's not go over there. Let's go over here. Right. And if that situation exists, right?
right.
Because that's that repetition.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's when I say surf trips, right?
Yeah.
So when you go on surf trips with a group of people and you see the lineup, and sometimes you go with, a couple good guys that are in your group, watch them, try to, mimic and try to identify that, okay, I'm stepping into that level with them and I'm trying to kind of push my limits. They're taking off deeper. Ask them about, oh man, your board is way smaller, and kind of have confidence because everyone's like, I get the same question. Man, that's such a thinner board. Oh my gosh, why, because at a certain point, it's like what I always say to you're going on a NASCAR track with a velodrome, it's got that sideways wall, and you're driving a minivan. And it's like you can't do anything. You can't turn, you can't cut through because you're riding a minivan. You're riding a big, thick fish. You're riding this huge old honky thing. It's way too much volume. And so you can't swing your weight. You can't handle that board. And that's the issue. And then they say, well, I don't get enough reps to be able to try it. Well, that's when you go on surf trips because
Yeah.
you need to take a new board, challenge yourself, go on a coaching surf trip with a coach. And that's where that comes in.
Yeah. So the other part about surf trips, because I know we got one coming up in March for El Salvador.
Yes.
And what I like about that one, it's long. It's a
Yeah.
long wave. And
Yep.
so long waves present a couple opportunities. One, it breaks the wave up, so there's multiple takeoff areas, but it provides somebody that, let's say, doesn't have the fast twitch muscle memory to uh kind of settle into their board. And I've seen you do this. I've seen you get up and you kind of settle into your board
Mhm.
with your feet. You kind
Yeah.
of dig in and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm settled, I'm balanced.
Check, check,
Now
check.
now
Yeah.
let's surf,
Yeah.
right? And it gives somebody that takes that whole process for you is really quick,
Yeah.
but for me it's slower, and for somebody with a lower, skill level, it's even slower. And so longer waves allow you that check, check, check and not feel rushed. Because growing up, I grew up at a beach break. It's like you get up and you go pump, 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 pump,
Right.
turn, close
Yes.
out, right?
Yeah.
And then I look at stuff on video and I'm like, I didn't do anything. And I'm not learning anything.
Yeah.
Like, so having that ability to kind of slow down, almost consciously think about what you're doing on the wave,
Yeah.
and getting used to a wave throughout the whole week that you understand where it's breaking, where it's doing different things, so you
Right.
can do different maneuvers at those locations instead of forcing maneuvers.
Correct.
What do you think about that? For people
Yeah.
forcing maneuvers in a place that's not the place to do it. I do it
Yes.
all the time.
Yes. I mean, it's part of it. It's part of trying to see what sticks, And so um you're really trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And I encourage it because sometimes you'll unlock something completely new and you're like, wow, I just did it off the lip by on this closeout. And most of them, 9 out of 10, you fell on your back and, board hits you in the face and things like that. But it really takes the, trying new things and things like that in order for it to unlock new levels. And
Yeah.
so, and that's why, like, when you think about kids, they go to surf different breaks and they go really fast and they're catching all these waves on the inside and things like that are just like really good because they're catching a million waves on the inside where other people that just sit out there and wait for the sets, they're getting 4 to 6 waves an hour at the max, and these little kids are catching 20 waves,
Yeah.
so that's kind of the thing is that you kind of have to be like all over the map, catching a lot of waves, some of them closing out. You're going to learn. And so you have to be really aggressive out there.
It's that quality repetition, right?
Yeah.
So the kids are getting, maybe they're not as good a wave, but they're getting
Yeah.
more and
Yeah.
they're matching kind of where they're at. Like, and to your
Right.
point, I love that when I coach with you and I see you working with students, it's about repetition. It's about, hey, go for this one, go for this one, go for this one.
Right.
You're like
Yeah.
a bloodhound. You're like sniffing out for everyone and you're
Yes.
making sure they're on it. And it's so good because if you're just a buoy out there,
Right.
you're sabotaging your progression,
Yes.
right? Waiting for the best one, right?
You're
And inevitably what happens, you do nothing on that wave because it's so precious to you because you've been waiting for so long. And I tell people all the time, like, make your paddling strokes
yeah.
precious
Yeah.
and just burn waves, like go for as many waves as you can
Right.
because that's how you progress. But
Right.
don't waste your strokes. Like it's the total opposite.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm always like, go for this one. And then my clients are like, oh, what are you talking about? What wave? And I see this bump and they see it as like a flat wave, but I can see the foreground in front of it, the bottom's dropping. And so it's going to end up going like this when it hits that sandbar. But people are just looking at the top, and the top is very flat. I'm looking down here where the bottom drops. And
Yeah.
so, you have to look more about 20 feet in front of that where the face of the wave is. That tells the intel of everything. And so I'm like, go, go, go. But then they don't want to go. And so they're like, what wave? What wave? And I'm like, already too late. You already asked that question. I'm like, you should have been already there and then you would have caught that wave. Nobody else sees it. So you would have been the only person paddling for it. And those are the waves that people don't see. But when you work with a coach like me or you, we can see that from far away.
Yeah.
And so that's the intel that we're trying to show them and get more reps out of that.
Yeah, that time and space like concept, I teach it in level 2, you teach it like all the time,
Yeah.
and it is one of the hardest things. And again, people just need to be able to see lots of waves.
Yeah.
And we also teach like, why is it that way?
Yeah.
That helps. But like my homework for them is go on Surfline and just watch waves. Go to
Yeah.
your local break and sit there at lunch and just watch
Yeah.
waves. And you'll
Yeah.
start to see what we're seeing.
Right.
It won't be magic anymore, which makes it,
Yes.
I kind of like being a magician. It's kind of
Yeah.
cool. But they're like,
Yeah.
whoa, I didn't even know it was a wave.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I call them under the blanket waves because it's just kind of like they're kind of under the blanket, like people don't see it. So
Yeah. I
it's
like that.
really about the foreground dropping, and you're constantly studying these tiny little lines on the waves, not just the face of the wave, So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And I think people I've heard clients go, oh, well, you just know this break. And I'm like, no, we can do this. We can go, you and I can go anywhere in the world and
Yeah,
give us 15 minutes of watching the waves and we can figure out where that blanket is, where the
absolutely.
waves are breaking. And it's just time in the water, time watching a ton of waves.
Yes.
And really it's an innate understanding of how waves break.
Yeah.
Um,
And what I want to add to that is that when we look at the wave and we're paddling, we don't go back and forth, like we're not looking all over. We look at it and we see the wave and we see exactly, because we need a timeline to see how fast it's bending up or bending. So it determines whether we need to paddle fast towards the beach or laterally or out to the lineup. And so a lot of times people go and then they go, "Oh, I see the wave," and they turn around and start looking for it and just start scrapping,
yeah.
and you're like, you need more intel.
Yeah.
At what rate is this wave going to lift up and break on your back? Or right, so you have to slow down. You're already there. You don't have to turn around until the last second and then do 1-2 paddle and you're in. So it
Yeah.
just depends on staring at the wave much longer. And that's the number one thing that my clients miss, is that they don't track the wave. They do 2 paddle strokes while they look back, and then 2 looking forward, and then they 2 back, 2 forward. It's either, oh man, I need to be way over there and paddle straight for 6 strokes, where you're going, I need to get there as fast as I can. Then look back and go, oh, I need to readjust. This wave just turned, the face turned on me, so I need to start pointing my nose left. You know, things like that. So it's really important to kind of track the wave and seeing if the bottom's going to drop or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's we know it because of experience with those repetitions.
Yeah.
With these folks, as you're learning, as you're progressing, and this is a huge point, like
Yeah.
for surf progression, wave catching. And I tell people, I'm like, hey, if you're catching waves and you're paddling and it feels easy, guess what? You're probably doing something right.
Right.
If it
Yes.
feels hard, I guarantee you're doing something wrong
Yes.
in that whole sequence. And
Yep.
so that those are people's litmus tests that they're like, oh, if I feeling, oh, this is really hard, I must be doing something wrong. Yes, that's your signal. Like
Yes.
you need to slow down, you need to get more information before you make your move. And
Yep.
it saves you a ton of energy. I'm big. My whole curriculum is about saving energy. I'm just like the laziest surfer. And so the to catch the most waves with the least amount of energy, it's
Right.
putting all this together. And
Yes.
that's I actually got it from someone like you, that was at your level, at that kind of like that qualifying series level, just ripping the snot out of waves. And I kept watching the guy. I'm like, I could paddle circles around him, but he was catching waves with like no strokes, one stroke, like so easy. And I was like, what is going on? And I just drilled him. I'm like, hey, Mish, what's going on? Like, how do you do that? And he just kind of put the two things together. I was like, oh, I get it now.
Yes.
And from then on, it's like a cheat code.
Less work.
Less work, more
Yeah. And you
waves.
see
Yeah.
just glide and just, what should I do? Should I go right on this one? It's a peak. It's
Yeah.
like it's like nothing.
Yeah.
People put so much stress on an effort, sure effort, and we're trying to be like, do less, do the right technique. Then, and for me, it's start early so that you can make those adjustments. So you're
Yeah.
not frantic at the end going, oh my gosh, the wave turned. It's like you had so much time staring at that wave, and as you stared at it, you could have paddled towards the peak because the
Yeah.
wave was soft. And so you could have gone to the power more and then just done, oh, perpendicular, couple extra paddles, and you were up.
Yeah.
Versus, and sometimes it's not always perpendicular. Like today, this morning, I was surfing, coaching at Oceanside, and it was running so fast and it was so good. It was like just ripping. The wall was like running, like, and so, you have to kind of calibrate. Like if you thought it was there, then you have to think 10 yards further down the
Right.
line.
Right.
By the time you turn around, it's going to be right on your back. And then if you timed it wrong, then you have to angle your board to kind of drop in as you go. But I like to tell people, catch it early, perpendicular, so that you're in the pocket. And when you're in the pocket, you could do your off the lips, and the first few turns are your most critical. And so people are trying to like get up right down the line, and then they're like, okay, I'm ready. Now they're going to do turns. But by then,
Right.
half the size and half the power.
Yeah.
And
So let's
so,
get into that. Cause so
yeah,
we talked about catching waves. Now somebody's up on the wave, the pocket is where people should get comfortable in.
Yes.
But maybe a common mistake that what I'm hearing from you is that they just race out to the shoulder.
Yes.
So how
Because
does someone
after,
break that kind of comfort level? Like, do you have any tips on like just
yeah.
hey, just stay in the pocket, or are there ways that you talk to people about that?
So what I say is when the peak is coming at you, say this is the main peak right here is where
Mhm.
it's going to break first. You want to go meet it out on the furthest point out where you feel like you can catch it. And what people do is they wait for it to come to them and they're waiting. And then I'm like, I'm going to catch it on this shoulder in this corner. And so they're already what I call they're going to get skirt steak instead of the filet mignon, which is
Right.
right there, just waiting for you on a golden platter, just medium rare butter. And it's like, but you're like, nope, I'm going to go get the skirt steak over here that's burnt and crisped. And I'm going to, so that's one thing. And then other people go, whoa, that guy's leaving filet on there. I'm going to go take it. And then
Right.
they paddle around. You're like, and then you're like, man, that guy just totally snaked me or took my wave and he waved hogs. And you're like, well, you left the filet there. So it was going to spoil. So he took it, so you have to kind of paddle out to the peak, catch it, turn it around at the earliest point, catch it perpendicular, and then start ripping down the line. You have to change your way of thinking of like shoulder hopping surfing versus going right to the diamond, which is the power point
Yeah.
of the wave.
So when someone gets it at that PowerPoint, like I still see people run down the line.
Yeah.
So how do you stop people from running down the line? You just be like, hey, do a turn. Because again, it gets to this point where like, but I don't want to fall, Dan.
Yeah.
I
You
just
have
got
to
the
fall to
best.
get
I got
better.
the best wave. I don't want to fall.
Yeah. Yeah. No risk, no reward. I mean, I remember I used to do a lot of airs and they used to call me Air Dan, and I would blow 500 waves just for like a year, not landing anything. And they're like, man, you just wasted a wave. And I heard that a lot. And then all of a sudden I started landing ollie oops, standing stiff airs, like, you know, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, that's awesome. But until people are gonna bash you until you land it. And then once you land it, like all those pro servers, they blew 5 million waves before they can do all those things. And it's because they got a lot of reps because they're catching wave after wave after wave after wave. And they're catching 30 to 50 waves to your 4 or 6,
Yeah.
per session. So that's like 20 sessions, of you versus one session for them. So how many years is that when you think about it? It's like that's why people that are catching a lot of reps improve much faster.
Well, and they're catching it to
Yeah.
extend that point. They're catching it at a better place on the wave to do the things you want to do.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
So, like, I would, if you're doing airs and you're falling, I'd go right next to you because I
Yeah.
know right when you fell, I could catch the rest of the wave. It'd be perfect,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Like, get with crowds, people get this like self-consciousness, like, oh, if I blow this wave, they're gonna start sneaking me. Like, no, go blow the wave. Tell them, hey, I'm gonna try something new. I'm probably gonna fall. Get ready to catch this wave down the line.
Yep.
Like,
And guess
stoke
what?
people out.
Nobody cares either. Nobody
No,
cares.
everybody cares
Nobody's
about
looking at you.
themselves.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nobody
Exactly.
cares about you. They care about
Just like the
themselves.
golf thing. Nobody cares. They're not really laughing. They're just like, oh, rookie. That's
Yeah.
it. You just go, oh, this guy's learning. Cool, whatever.
Yeah.
He caught the wave, or he hit the shot, went into the trees. So what? He's gonna get his golf cart. Just get out of my way so that I can hit my ball. That's what they're
Right.
thinking.
Let them, but communicate. Like, let the guys know if I know, hey, Dan, I'm going to try these top turns and I fall like most of the time. I'll be like, hey, Dan, catch the wave down the line for me. Like,
Yes.
because I'm going to do the turn here.
Yep.
And I'm most likely going to fall. If I don't fall, I'm okay with you dropping in on me.
Yeah.
I'll be stoked if I don't fall.
Yeah.
But,
Pretty much.
1 out of 50 times that might happen.
Yeah.
So if you communicate, you actually create more waves for everybody.
Yeah.
And then everybody catches more waves, and then you get to progress all at the same time, even in a crowded lineup,
Yeah.
which is really fun.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's such a pet peeve of mine. Yeah. The drive, do nothing all the
Yeah.
whole way down.
Yeah.
And then like a little tiny check turn at the end and go, they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And they've been
Call
sitting for 20
dodging.
minutes. Yeah. Yeah. So many opportunities for people to progress on waves like that.
Yeah.
Um, wow. What about, we talked about boards.
Yeah.
can we maybe talk about like some specifics on like more vertical surfing?
Yeah.
Um, and I know there's going to be a lot of kind of like, well, it depends, but like for vertical surfing, what are the wave requirements you need, and what are the minimum board requirements you need in order to even attempt really vertical pocket turns?
Yeah. So first of all, I recommend going on a really good destination surf trip if you are going to really enhance your surfing, like vertical turns, because it's really hard to do on your local break because chances are you're not going to get those reps because, for me, it's like me going to Trestles, Oceanside, Scripps on a really good day, um, and, even Encinitas at D Street where it's right in my backyard, but you have to go to those places. And guess what? You're going to see a lot of good surfers there. And that's why they're there because they're good. That's why, because it's able to do vertical surfing. And so a lot of times up north where you're at, you're going to have a harsher crowd. They're going to be like, who's this guy? And, is he going to blow it? Yeah, he's a kook. Like, you're going to think that in your mind, but they don't really care. So, what I would recommend is, going on a good trip to like the Maldives or the Mentawais or, you know, go surf good breaks, like El Salvador with us, where is every single wave. And that way you're going to get the kinks out and then someone filming you because you're going to go, I wasn't vertical. I swear I was vertical. And
Or
you feel,
I wasn't in the like I was out on the shoulder instead
yeah,
of the pocket. Like yeah,
yeah,
that time and space that we think we're in, that we feel like we're in,
yeah,
but video exposes it. Been like, no, bro, you were out on the shoulder.
yes, that's
That's
right. And
that's a huge tip.
yeah, and I'm always like, when I see myself, when I get videoed, I'm like, I bet you that wasn't good. That's how I always feel because every time I look at it, I'm like, that's not what I thought. Okay. And so, but it's good because it keeps you humble and it keeps you wanting to get better because you're like, because that's how you're going to get better. If you're just like, good job, every wave, good job. Oh, I killed it. You're capped because you're going to be, you're already putting the ceiling on yourself. And so you want to just be like, okay, I'm going to get better. And that's how pro athletes are because they all they hear from their coach or themselves is like, oh, that wasn't as vertical enough. I wasn't as high as, my air, or I could have been cleaner on my, my neck looked like I was, wringing my neck on that turn. And so you're kind of cleaning yourself up, and
Yeah.
so, and that's when you compete, it's a really good thing. If you have local surf contests where you're doing like masters and stuff, where you're competing with like less, higher level people, like older people and older surfers, and you compete, it's great because the judges will give you the score and you're like, oh, I just got a 3.5, and I thought that was a 5.5 or 7, and they bring the reality to you with a paper. And so you're like, huh, okay, next time I'm gonna, and people film it and have them film the other guys that are getting higher scores, and you'll start to kind of mentally, you'll get tougher. And so,
I can't believe you just said that because I remember my first master's NSSA. It was at Oceanside Harbor, and I got out and I just kind of passed the judges. I was like, that was super fun. And they're like, yeah, you were surfing kind of horizontal.
yeah,
And I
no,
was like, I was? Like,
yeah,
no way. And like, and I got fourth in the heat, and I was like, yeah, that's not gonna work. That's not
yeah,
gonna get me through. And I wasn't concerned about getting through, but it was that realization that I was like, oh, I thought that was a sick turn.
yeah.
It was not.
It's it's really harsh, and you have to just take it because sometimes you're kind of like, screw you,
Yeah.
like, and so
I feel like the surf coaching's better than the competition then.
yeah. I mean, both is good. That's why,
Yeah.
when I used to coach high school kids and pro junior kids, they compete, and then I'm telling them all this stuff, and then they sometimes don't want to listen to me. And then they go ahead and get the score, and they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man, it wasn't what you think. You're thinking one thing in your head, and you're patting yourself up, and you're like, dude, that was an 8, And I'm like, no, that's a 4.5. Like, compared to everybody else, like they're doing much more.
Yeah.
And so, Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a good point. That's a good point. You always kind of need someone other like an objective
correct.
voice. Yeah. Yeah. Um so what else with progression? So we went through wave catching, we went through the first phases of staying in the pocket.
We're talking about
Any
board.
Yeah, let's talk about boards because I
Yeah,
think I asked the question like, okay, for vertical surfing, we want this kind of cuppy kind of wave
yeah.
that's consistent.
Thinner
Um,
rails,
so
narrower
you want
board.
thinner, narrower,
Yeah,
more reactive,
yes.
essentially.
And I would say just me as a benchmark, when I'm thin, when I'm like 170, 165, 170, I could be riding a 24 liter board. When I'm, 180, like what I am right now, I'm like 25.4-ish. And that's kind of a benchmark, I think. When you go more volume, yes, you could still flow better, but you'll lose the tighter turns in the pocket. And you could still do it. You could still hit the lip and you could still do that, but it turns into this versus using the rail inside the pocket to
So
slash in
for those
versus
not seeing that, it was like a windshield wiper,
yeah.
which is not so good versus an actual carve in that pocket.
It's still cool. I mean,
Yeah,
I like them both, but it's it's what happens. So when you have a bigger, more volume board, you're gonna go like bam, bam.
yeah,
And when it's thinner, you're in the curve here, so you get to slice and you carve down into it. So
right,
it's a different type of turn. And the
right,
carve in the pocket more gets more points, I believe. Because it's risking more. And if you can't fit that tight turn, if your rail and your leader is not right for you.
right.
So
So, one of the things I always have learned is that speed helps with everything.
yes.
So how do you balance having less volume but maintaining speed? Because I feel like there's maybe a precursor to
Yep.
the turn.
Yes. So you can have more volume, but pinch that rail like thinner and have more thicker in the middle and flatter rocker to keep that speed. Because once you get that speed on a mushy, junky wave, you want the speed, but at the same time, you want to be able to knife it, right? When the pocket just lifts up for you, you want to slash it right there.
Yeah,
And you want to have that control to be able to, carve on a dime. And so um, and when you have that thick, round, beefy rail line, you could only draw out long turns. But that's what some people might want to do. So I'm not bagging on that.
right. It's style driven.
Yes, if
Yeah.
you want to kind of cruise and kind of use the whole face and just kind of carve, great.
But that's what you're talking about with if you're surfing a wave that has a bunch of deep holes in it and it backs off and it
Yeah,
stands up and it backs off and stands up, it's nice to have the volume to ride through
absolutely.
those flat spots, right?
Yeah,
But if you have a wave that's really good, that's steep and it's right down the reef, having that volume is a hindrance in
yes,
that sense, right?
yeah, yes,
So this gets me to like another philosophy of mine that I always talk about with when people come to me, I'm like, hey, I'm going to teach you how to paddle whatever board you want to surf.
yeah,
That way, you're not looking at the surf going, well, the paddle out's going to be tough, so I need to take a bigger board. It's like,
yeah,
no, not necessarily. If you have good technique and good strategy getting out, you can ride a 4.6 if you want, right?
right,
I've
right.
actually taken a 4.6 at my local it was a wake surfboard just to see if I can catch it. You can catch a wave,
Yeah,
on really anything that will plane,
right,
right? And then once you're up, is that board's design matching the style of surfing that you want to do?
correct.
That should be people's decision.
Absolutely right. Yep, yep.
Do you
So
see a benefit though in having either a board that is a little bit more advanced given where you're at to push you to that stage, or do you feel like the better approach is having a little bit less advanced to kind of move to that next stage? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like,
you
do you
mean
think
board
the
wise
yeah,
or
do
the
you think
wave
the
wise?
board can make that difference, that make help you get to the next stage? Do you try to push yourself on a board that's not maybe your sensitivity level? Like if I were to ride your 25 liter board, I'd need a pretty darn good wave to ride it,
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
So
that's absolutely right. Yeah. So to answer that question, you have to have the right wave in order to try something new, in order to push your limits. You can't, because you're going to get frustrated. You can't just
yeah,
go like, okay, I'm going to make this work, because guess what? It's going to be 1 to 2 tomorrow, and 4 to 6 close out straight swell. You're not going to get that rep. And so if you're going to try something new, bring it on your trip. And the second thing for the question that you had was, you know, if you take a board that's really above your pay grade and say like, but you're like, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to rip and be like jittery, and I just want to kind of smooth and carve. Well, guess what? You could, as you get jittery and you learn that, you can always taper yourself back and
right.
learn the carve and control it, because now you've already reached level 8, and then you could 7 or 6 and do less and just work on your style, because you already know the weight points and the how to push and how to swing your arm around. But if you get to a higher level faster with the shorter board, it only gets easier to back off.
Yeah. I loved, a great example. We did our clinic in Encinitas last
Yeah,
month. And on the second surf day, you took two people and you gave them way low volume boards,
yeah,
especially given the waves that we were surfing. And I was like,
right.
whoa, but they were catching waves.
Yeah,
They were doing their best to generate speed on that little tiny board. And it was such a eye opener for both of them. I talked to both of them and they're like, I did not think I could catch waves on it.
yeah,
And they were loving it. They were having a good time. Now, I don't think that they would ride that board in those conditions again, but I think it was a breakthrough moment for them to say that I could if I wanted to.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, they caught the wave and they experienced freedom. Like when they stood up, it wasn't just the same old line drive.
Totally.
And like, you know, just hang in there and just ride it all the way and then pull out. They were like, "Whoa, this thing moves. If I turn my head, it wraps around and it moves." And
Yeah.
that's how you want to be free. You don't want to be handcuffed surfer.
No, no. There is a stage though, and I remember, and I'm probably still guilty of this, that you get on too small but too reactive of a board, and that's why I like to pull back and get less reactive. I like jumping between the two
Yeah,
to really keep myself grounded, because
yeah,
if I'm constantly riding a super small
yeah,
shortboard wave or board, my body doesn't start to get coordinated. Like I start to look like a kook again.
yeah.
Do you see that often? Do you pull people
Yeah.
back every once in a while as well?
Absolutely. Make him ride a 9 foot sometimes, and then back onto the 5'10", and then a 7'2". So my main board, like if I'm coaching at Grandview, because that's where our permit is, I ride like a 6'8". I call it's the new school for it's on our website. And that board, I've designed it where it's thin rails, it's flat rocker, in the tail, it looks like a short board. So if you didn't see the back half of the board, if I covered it, you'd be like, that's a short board. But it catches waves in the front end so
Yeah.
flat, and it rides like a short board. And
Just
it's
has a
just
little extra swing weight and that's it.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, probably 40 liters, 38 liters, but it's pinched thin. And so I'm able to do vertical turns, and I love it surfing on a wave that's like a longboard wave, and so
So you don't
I
mind having people switch boards, because
for
I
sure.
hear that all the time, like, oh man, I
Yeah.
can't switch boards. It screws up my surfing. I'm like, I don't think it does. You
Yeah.
don't think it does?
No, no,
No.
it's better, because you don't want to be stale on this one type of board and just be like, stuck with that board. And that's
Yeah.
why it's really good to try all different boards. We used to like be like, "Oh, let me ride your board and let me ride your board." And then we try and then be like, "Man, this board feels good." And then sometimes you're like, "This one is terrible." You could just feel feel it. And the more you know and the more you feel like the feelings of it, like, gosh, this thing is so slow. Like I can't even turn this thing. And you start to kind of understand boards under your feet, because you're trying it in the same condition, you know, with every different board. So
Yeah, that
yeah,
sensitivity, I think, is so key to surfing. I always associate it with skateboarders. I love watching skateboarders.
Yeah.
Their sensitivity to the skateboard with their kick flips and their pop shoves and everything. It's because they have all those reps on the board.
Hmm.
And for me, being from swimming, I feel it on my hands when I'm not in the water for a while. I can feel that sensitivity. For you, again, it's your feet. It's that connection to the board and that sensitivity, right?
Right.
And
It's
that's a big part of progression, right? So you get to this point where you're just doing so much in your head.
yeah.
You're all this conscious, like, okay, Dan's telling me to twist here, and he's telling me to look for a target there, right? And it's all this conscious, but there's a point at which you need to kind of just settle down and feel what you're feeling,
Yes.
and getting that enhances that sensitivity,
Yeah.
right?
And sometimes people ride boards that don't feel good, but since they just bought it, they stay on it for like 2 years. I'm gonna
Yeah.
make it work. I'm gonna make it work. And you're like, throw that thing away. I'm just kidding. I mean,
No,
sell it
you
to
said that
somebody and
before.
just get rid of it because
Yeah.
it's not good. It's and when you get to a higher level, it's even harder. So you have to be able to part ways with it and just be like, nope, that's not it, and just get rid of it. I don't waste my time
Yeah.
because it's a board that is holding your back surfing. And you only have so much time surfing,
Yeah.
of like your youth. And you don't want to be tinkering around a board that doesn't work. And you're like, but I just bought it. Well, sell
Yeah.
it, take a $200 loss and move forward, and
Well, and that sensitivity
yeah,
grows as you get better. I
yeah,
think people like in the whitewater still, they have zero
sure.
sensitivity to that
Yeah,
feeling. So if you're at that intermediate level, this is when you start to incorporate what Dan's talking about. Like, you give it less leash.
yes,
And then you're at Dan's level, there's like no leash.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
That thing works or it doesn't work.
yeah.
No, that's crazy. So that's awesome. Any other thoughts on progression? Because I think we covered a ton.
Yeah, I mean, go on trips, go, get good coaching, before it's too late. And you're like, hey, now I'm going to get coaching. And it's like, they come to me and I'm like, this is going to take a lot of time to undo a lot of work that
Yeah.
you've done. So, because your pop up and everything, where you get in creates a drive for you to do the higher level surfing. And if you're shoulder hop surfing and you're constantly over there and you're paddling your heart out and catching every single wave, then it can still be done, but it's just a lot more work. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love it. Would come full circle to what you're talking
yeah,
about with foundation.
yeah,
It's okay to break down the house, do a remodel. It's okay to jackhammer that foundation and put a little bit more depth into it. It's
yeah,
going to build a better, stronger house.
absolutely. And
Yeah, you have
go
to have
ahead.
that foundation. You have to have you have to have that ability to learn and be humble. That's the
Yes.
first step, right?
Yep.
If you don't, if you're just fixed on,
Yeah.
oh yeah, bro, I got this.
Yeah.
I look fine, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to progress.
No. Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dan. Appreciate your
Yeah.
time. And I'm looking forward to El Salvador. If anybody out there is listening, wants some info on that, just email one of us. I'll put Dan's info in the show notes as well. Um, and whenever you're down in San Diego, hit him up.
Yep.
Fulcrum Surf, Dan
Yep.
Mori. You're the man.
Great. Thanks a lot,
Cool.
Rob. All
Thanks,
right. Good
buddy.
talking to you. Okay. See ya.
Yeah.
Bye.